The serene facade of a suburban neighborhood can often hide the darkest secrets. Behind the closed doors of one such home, a deadly secret was brewing. A secret that would eventually lead to a tragic and violent end. This is the story of a husband whose illicit affair with his stepson set off a chain of events that would forever shatter a family. It began as a seemingly normal relationship within a blended family, nothing out of the ordinary. But beneath the surface, hidden from the eyes of the unsuspecting wife, a forbidden attraction was growing between her husband and her son from a previous marriage. As the affair deepened, the lies multiplied, and the tension in the household began to rise. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and when this one did, it sparked a confrontation that no one could have predicted. What started as an illicit affair ended in a gruesome murder that shocked not only the family, but the entire community. How did a family built on love and trust become the scene of such a horrific crime? In this chilling tale, we'll uncover the dark secrets, the hidden desires, and the tragic consequences of a betrayal too deep to forgive. In the beginning, they seemed like an ordinary blended family, navigating the usual challenges of bringing two households together. The husband, a successful businessman in his late 40s, had married his wife just a few years earlier. She was a caring and devoted mother to her teenage son from a previous marriage, and they all moved into a charming home in a quiet neighborhood, hoping for a fresh start. The husband quickly took on the role of a father figure, earning the trust and admiration of his stepson. He was attentive, supportive, and always ready to lend an ear when the boy needed someone to talk to. It was a relationship that seemed ideal, one built on mutual respect and understanding. But as time went on, what appeared to be a healthy family dynamic began to take a darker turn. The wife, busy with her own responsibilities, remained blissfully unaware of the growing closeness between her husband and her son. It started innocently enough. Longer conversations, shared hobbies, and an increasing amount of time spent alone together. But soon, the relationship crossed boundaries that should never have been crossed. The husband's intentions, initially shrouded in the guise of paternal care, slowly revealed a more sinister motive. He began to exploit the boy's trust, manipulating his emotions and fostering a dependence that blurred the lines between affection and something far more inappropriate. The stepson, vulnerable and craving approval, found himself drawn into a web of deceit, confused by the conflicting feelings of admiration and discomfort. As the affair took hold, the once warm and loving atmosphere of the home became strained. The husband and stepson were now bound by a secret that could destroy their family bond. The secret affair could only remain hidden for so long. As the husband and stepson continued their illicit relationship, the tension within the household grew more palpable. The wife, though initially oblivious, began to notice subtle changes in her husband's behavior. His sudden secrecy, unexplained absences, and the way he seemed overly attentive to her son. It wasn't just the husband's behavior that changed. Her son, once open and cheerful, had become withdrawn and anxious, avoiding eye contact and spending more time alone in his room. The wife's suspicions were initially vague, an uneasy feeling that something was off, but as days turned into weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. She noticed the stolen glances between her husband and son, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly whenever she entered the room. Her unease grew into a gnawing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. The turning point came one evening when the wife returned home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, too quiet. As she moved through the rooms, she heard muffled voices coming from her son's bedroom. Her heart raced as she approached the door, her mind filled with a mix of fear and confusion. She stood frozen for a moment, listening to the voices on the other side of the door. And then, in a single moment of horror, the truth became painfully clear. Pushing the door open, she found her husband and son in a compromising situation, their shocked expressions mirroring her own. The betrayal was like a physical blow, leaving her reeling. The scene before her was more than she could comprehend, a nightmare that no mother or wife should ever have to face. Her husband tried to explain, stumbling over his words, but there was no justification for what she had just witnessed. The confrontation that followed was explosive. The wife, devastated and furious, demanded answers, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Her husband's attempts to calm her only fueled her rage. The stepson, caught between shame and fear, was unable to look his mother in the eye. The secret was out, and there was no going back. The wife's world had been shattered in an instant, her trust obliterated by the two people she loved the most. But this was only the beginning of the nightmare. The emotional storm unleashed that night would soon escalate into something far more dangerous, a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. The days following the discovery of the affair were filled with a toxic mix of silence and confrontation. The wife, consumed by rage and betrayal, could hardly bear to be in the same room as her husband. Every glance, every word between them was charged with tension. The once peaceful home had become a battleground, with the son caught in the crossfire, torn between guilt and fear. The husband, desperate to salvage whatever was left of his life, tried to reason with his wife, to explain away the inexcusable. But his attempts only deepened her anger. She could see through his lies, the manipulation that had kept her in the dark for so long. Her thoughts spiraled, alternating between despair and a cold, simmering fury. She couldn't believe that the man she had trusted had betrayed her so profoundly, and with her own son. It was during one of their many arguments that the tension finally snapped. The wife, in a moment of uncontrollable rage, lashed out at her husband. The argument escalated quickly, turning from words to physical confrontation. The husband, who had been trying to keep the situation under control, suddenly found himself on the defensive as his wife's fury reached a boiling point. Blinded by anger and the overwhelming sense of betrayal, the wife grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter. The husband, shocked by the turn of events, tried to disarm her, but the struggle only intensified. In the heat of the moment, with emotions running high and rational thought all but gone, the unthinkable happened. With a swift and violent motion, the wife plunged the knife into her husband's chest. The room fell silent, the only sound the wife's ragged breathing and the husband's gasps of shock and pain. He staggered, disbelief etched on his face as he looked down at the wound. Blood quickly began to pool on the floor, a stark contrast against the cold tiles. The stepson, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room, only to be met with the horrifying sight of his mother standing over his dying stepfather. The reality of what had just occurred hit him like a freight train. His world, already fractured by the affair, had now been completely shattered by this act of violence. As the husband collapsed to the floor, life draining from his body, the wife dropped the knife, her fury giving way to shock and horror at what she had done. The son, paralyzed by the sight before him, could do nothing but stare in disbelief as the man who had once been a central figure in his life lay dying at his feet. The murder sent shockwaves through the family and the community. The once tranquil home was now a crime scene, marked by the grim reality of the violence that had taken place within its walls. The wife, still in shock from what she had done, was arrested on the spot. The stepson, traumatized by the horrific scene he had witnessed, was left to grapple with the unbearable guilt and confusion that followed. As the news of the murder spread, the community was stunned. Neighbors who had once seen the family as the picture of suburban stability were now questioning everything they thought they knew. The local media quickly picked up the story, painting a portrait of a family torn apart by secrets and betrayal. The sensational nature of the crime made it the talk of the town, with everyone speculating about the events that had led to such a tragic outcome. The police investigation moved swiftly. Detectives worked to piece together the events of that fateful night, interviewing the wife, the stepson, and anyone else who might have insight into the family's dynamics. The affair between the husband and his stepson quickly became the focal point of the investigation, providing a motive for the wife's actions. The stepson, still reeling from the trauma, struggled to process the events. His relationship with his mother, once strong and loving, was now irreparably damaged. He couldn't understand how the situation had spiraled so far out of control, leading to the death of the man he had once admired, despite the complicated and inappropriate relationship they had shared. His testimony to the police was fragmented, filled with gaps as he tried to recount the moments leading up to the murder. The wife, on the other hand, was a mixture of remorse and defiance. While she confessed to the murder, her emotions swung between deep sorrow for what she had done and an unshakable belief that she had been driven to the brink by her husband's betrayal. The detectives noted her erratic behavior, which only added to the complexity of the case. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the affair was more than just a case of infidelity. It was a catalyst for a chain of events that had devastating consequences. The prosecutors built their case around the idea that the wife's actions, while horrific, were the result of a prolonged period of emotional abuse and manipulation by her husband. The defense, meanwhile, tried to portray the wife as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. In the end, the case would be decided in court, but the impact of the crime would linger in the minds of everyone involved. The family, once held together by bonds of love and trust, was now broken beyond repair, leaving a trail of shattered lives in its wake. In the end, this tragic story serves as a haunting reminder of the destructive power of secrets and the devastating consequences of betrayal. A family that once seemed solid and loving was torn apart by an illicit affair, leading to a horrific murder that forever changed the lives of everyone involved.